Hey guys, welcome back. Second project on the Jeep. Today we are going to be changing a bearing and axle seal on the left rear axle. So I've already taken the tire off. Basically, you've got your bolts that hold your caliper on. I'm sure they make a special wrench for this. It's kind of thin. I just have a pair of needle nose vice grips that I use to hold basically this nut or pin that bolt threads into. And then you got one on the bottom, same thing. Take those out, and then you've got two bolts back here. There's one here, one lower, and that removes this bracket, and you can pull the caliper off. And once we get that done, then we'll look at what's actually holding that axle in. It's going to be 13 millimeter on here, and then like I said, I just use a needle nose vice grip. Take your caliper off. Just gonna hang that up here out of the way. And then I believe that's 18 millimeter for the bolts that hold the bracket on. Always make sure that these pins move, they're not seized up if you're ever taking this stuff apart, because those pins seized up will cause you a lot of problems. And that's cool. Brake pad just came apart, so I'll have to get a new brake pad. Or new brake pads. The rotors don't look terrible. So, alright, then we get in here, we can see the seal is definitely leaking, everything's wet. Wet on the bottom. What holds that in is right here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 nuts that actually hold this retainer. You can see the studs right there. Once those are out, you also got to take this wheel speed sensor out, and then once that's out, and then you should be able to just pull this axle housing straight out. So let's see if that's true. That's going to be 18 millimeter as well. I might need to get something a little larger than this 1/2 inch or 3/8 ratchet. Oh. Alright, that's easy enough. So we can see that that retainer now is loose. So next step is I'm going to get a drain pan. Actually, I'm going to take that wheel speed sensor out. So let me do that real quick. That should just be, looks like 8mm. Which it is. And that should just push right out. Keyword, should. Let me work on that and I'll get a drain pan and we'll see if we can pull this axle. Alright guys, so simple as that. Just basically took the bolt out of that speed sensor, pushed it back. All I did was grab a hold of the axle and just pull on it and it came right out. So I'm just going to pull this out of here. Stand this up. Take the die grinder and I'll end up cutting this spacer, and I'll end up cutting the bearing, I believe. That'll have to get cut to come off, and then you can pull the seal off. And then I got a new setup here. Be able to put it all back together in reverse fashion with a press. The only thing I'm going to have a little trouble with is I'm probably going to have to get the welder out, and I'll have to run a bead of weld on this race here to try to get that out of the housing, because the new bearing isn't a two-piece, it's a one-piece. You can see it right here. It's a one-piece bearing. So, and then that should just push straight back in, and hopefully that goes as easy as it does. But we'll try to get this cleaned up and then start cutting stuff apart. So we've got a grinder with a cutoff wheel. Essentially, you just want to cut through this just enough. You don't want to hit the axle and damage that, but just start cutting through it. Just get to the point to where this will start to split with a chisel. So that's what I'm going to work on here. Then we'll take a chisel and a small hammer and just start to just like that. Now it's loose. And all that did was just cut a small slot in there. You can just see it barely. And then the bearing, the outer part of the bearing will be the same way. Just have to cut a small notch in there, break that race. Just kind of pry on that a little bit, and that should come right off. And then the inner race will be the same way. Have to take the grinder and just cut until you can get that to split. There it is. And it looks like I did get the axle just a little bit there. Let's see, you don't want to do that, but it should be okay. And then you just pull the seal off. And we can see that the reason why this seal was leaking is because it was damaged pretty severely. Get this off, clean it up, and then clean all that up, and then we can start reassembly. We'll press everything together. You can see the spacer is on, the retainer is on first. The bearing, you can see the inner part of the bearing. So the tapered part faces out. I'm sorry, the seal. And then if you look at the bearing, you've got basically the way this bearing is. If you look at the side of it, you can kind of see like this little extra ring that also is going to be facing outward, so you can see the rollers on this side. On this side here, you see how you don't really see the rollers, so you want this facing toward the outside, and then your spacer goes on. And then you just put that in the press and press it together. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll be back. Alright, after a bunch of messing around, finally got it all together. My press is a little too short, so it's kind of a pain, but it's together. Now we got to try to get the race out of the axle tube, and I'll have to use a welder for that. Good times. Alright, so I thought I was going to have to use a welder to get this out of here, but it looks like I just started prying on it, and it is coming out slowly. Just kind of working it back and forth, top to bottom. Hopefully it'll come right out. Maybe. Well, I'm going to continue to work at this. Hopefully just get that to walk right out of there, but you can see in the back there's a little bit of a gap, so I'll keep working at it. Alright, so I was able to get it pried out. You can see a little bit of it hanging out there, but once I got it to the front, it wouldn't come past, so I grabbed a small block so I can pry on the housing. Kind of got to hold the block and pry, because once you get it out to the front, if you're prying, you're essentially prying right on the race anyway, so you can't get it to go past that. So and just kind of keep working it back and forth, and eventually it should pop out of there. Get close. So you can get these out of here without a welder. There it is. Oh. So if you don't have a welder, I thought I was going to have to weld it. Not the case. I was able to get it out of there. So the next step should be just as simple as sliding the new bearing, axle, bearing, all that right back in. The retainer, I think, has to go a certain way, which it does. The holes are offset. They're further apart here than they are from here to here. So I should be able to just slide this back in, line up the axle, line up the retainer, and then just slowly work that back in, and then that seal should just pull in. essentially just like that. And that's back in, and then you can just work this sensor back into place. Get your wheel speed sensor back out, and that should be it. And then it's just reverse assembly. So nuts on the back side. Oh, one thing I did forget. Don't do that. Alright, so got that all out of there. Put this backing plate on. There's 3 bolts that hold it. Alright, once that's in and got everything all cleaned up, then you can take and slip that axle back in there. We'll lube up the seal just a little bit here. And then just push in on that retainer until you get that bearing to seat, or that seal to seat in there all the way, just like that. And then it's just reverse of what we did to begin with. 4 nuts on here. Your wheel speed sensor has 1 bolt, so we'll get that put back together. Got it all back together. 4 nuts tightened down for the retainer, and the 1 small bolt there for the wheel speed sensor. I ended up getting some new brake pads because when I was taking it apart, the 1 brake pad was looking kind of bad. So I'm going to replace that. The gist of that is the same as we did when we took it apart. There's 4 bolts literally that hold that whole brake assembly on. So once that's done, then pretty much the only thing you have left to do is just check your fluid level and make sure that that you have enough diff fluid. This one was leaking a little bit. I have been adding to it, but now that I got the new seal in there, hopefully everything's good. So save yourself some money. There's really not a lot to working on these vehicles, and like I said, the only specialty tool that I really had was just the press. And most places, if you get it all apart, if you don't have a press, most places will you know, you can go someplace and have them press the stuff back together for you. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So with the way things cost, or how much things cost now and the way things are going, it's always, if you can work on your own stuff, if you got the time, save yourself a little bit of money. So other than that, thank you for watching the video, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It'll help us out. So thanks again.